Good afternoon and good evening to our UCT alumni and friends of the University of Cape Town. My name is Libom Senganabam, and on behalf of the Development and Alumni Department at UCT, we extend a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is the second installment of the A Women-led UCT, which is a discussion series for alumni. And it's all about giving you, our alumni, the opportunity to hear directly from our most senior women leaders in the organization. Today, we look forward to listening to a very inspiring conversation between our Deputy Vice-Chancellors, Professors Loretta Feris, Sue Harrison, and Liz Lange, who will be sharing their reflections on their leadership journey at UCT. And a little later on, you will have the opportunity to pose your questions directly to them. But now, allow me the opportunity to introduce our moderator for this afternoon's session, Refilwe Moloto. Refilwe Moloto is a strategic and economic advisor with 15 years of experience in financial services, in emerging markets, research, broking, and asset management in Joburg, New York, and Cape Town. She currently serves as an external expert advisor on Eskom Pension and Provident Fund's Strategic Investment Committee, and was previously appointed to the South African chapter of the BRICS Business Council Sovereign Wealth Fund Experts Panel. She's a commentator and a thought leader on strategic economic and financial market development in Africa, and she also serves as a fellow of the 11th class of the Africa Leadership Initiative, a regional chapter of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. Many of you will know Refilwe from CapeTalk Radio, where she currently anchors the morning show called Breakfast with Refilwe Moloto. But what some of you may not know is that she's actually a UCT alumna in the making. She is currently completing her MCom in Development Finance at the Graduate School of Business. Refilwe, welcome, and I now hand over to you to introduce our panel.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Libo, and good afternoon to all of our guests, our alum, and friends of the university. Thank you also to and welcome to all of those of you watching us on Twitter Live. I'm very excited for today's conversation and feel honored to bring this particular conversation to you. It's 2020, we're 10 years away from the auspicious Vision to 2030 to which the university aspires. And I'm so excited to introduce you all to the women who are at the helm of where we'd like to go. It's fitting, therefore, as we step into the future, that we are represented, as this series is called, by Women in Leadership. As Libo mentioned, our guests this afternoon are Deputy Vice-Chancellor Loretta Feris, whose portfolio looks at student affairs, transformation, and social engagement. Deputy Vice-Chancellor Sue Harrison, whose portfolio includes research and internationalization, and Deputy Vice-Chancellor Liz Lange, whose portfolio includes teaching and learning. I think one of the most important things that we are learning as we charge into the future, and particularly the events of this week are teaching us, is that being a woman is not the only reason that we're here to celebrate and discuss these three auspicious leaders. They're also individuals and happen to just be individuals who happen to be women with full experiences, fully lived journeys. And I thought, therefore, it would be a really fitting start to our discussion for us to be introduced to their individual journeys to get to these points, their commitment and what inspired them to find out their way to and into academia, and of course what impassions them about each of their portfolios. Before we do that, I just want to indicate, as Libo highlighted, we will be conducting this discussion for about an hour, and after which, of course, we will open up the conversation to Q&A from you. But I'd like to encourage you to please, throughout the discussion, if you have any questions, do pop them into the Q&A box. Let us know what's on your mind, and we may well be able to address them as the conversation is laid forth. Deputy Vice-Chancellors, welcome to each of you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Deputy Vice-Chancellor Loretta Feris, I'll begin with you. No particular order, but alphabetical. We're equals here. Professor, please, won't you let us know what inspired you to enter academia, and how is it that that is playing out
So thank you, Refilwe, and good afternoon to the alumni. It's always wonderful to have a conversation with the alumni, and I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. So, you know, I started out, Refilwe, wanting to be a human rights lawyer, and so I did a law degree, and after my law degree, I went to work in a law firm. And soon realized that actually, you know, that's not where I really want to be. And so I ended up going, and I studied at Stellenbosch University. So I ended up actually going back to Stellenbosch, but running a public interest program where I engaged with communities, and in particular farming communities. And I guess it. I could relate because I'm in essence a farm girl. I'm from the Northern Cape, and I grew up in a rural community. So I started out doing that, and as a kind of a side gig, I suppose, I was teaching public interest law to students, and really kind of trying to bring in these principles of engaging with communities that are marginalized and teaching them their rights. And that led to me doing a master's and eventually a PhD. And before I know it, I was kind of in this route to academia. So I started a full-time job in academia at Stellenbosch University, and from there I had a stint in the US, where I was teaching at American University at the Washington College of Law. And at the time I was also completing my PhD, which focused on environmental law. So I came back and then had a position at the University of Pretoria. Before I was really sort of, I guess, you know, inspired to come to UCT because what at the time they were fully involving or developing a postgraduate degree program in environmental law, and that's what really was what attracted me to UCT. And so I just realized the other day, I've been at UCT for 11 years, and 7 of that 11 years in the law faculty, and just before I stepped into the position of Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Transformation, I was directing the Institute for Marine and Environmental Law. And I try to still be active in academia, so I have a cohort of PhDs that I supervise, and that allows me to still be active in my area. And then as a scholar, what interested me was, like I said, I did a PhD in environmental law, but I was really interested in the ways in which communities that are marginalized are disproportionately impacted by environmental degradation. So my area is really environmental justice, which is sort of this intersection between human rights and the environment. And so hence, also the interest in driving transformation, because this sort of quest for social justice, I think, has always been at my core.
It certainly is. And how great to see a person living out their truth and their intention so excellently. I'll extend the same question to you, Professor Sue Harrison. Your portfolio is research and internationalization. You do have some passions for internationalization that includes the African continent, which I think sometimes we often forget when we say international. I would love to know your journey that brought you to this particular point, not only in terms of caring about research and internationalization, but also holding particularly what is seen as rare feat of such accomplishment within STEM as a chemical engineer at this level, playing at this level in academia.
Thanks very much, Refilwe. And again, it's a privilege to be on this part of this conversation. And I think I'd also, as the new kid on the executive block, like to say that I consider it a real privilege to serve UCT and its community as part of the executive. and a particular privilege because we are this diverse and somewhat non-conventional exec in being a woman-led team. And it provides some real differences and gives a depth of opportunity and ideas and ways of doing things, which it's great to have the opportunity to work in that way. It's a far cry from where I started out in the engineering environment, which, as you can imagine, 20 or 30 years ago was a much more male environment. And so maybe if I take you back, I'm the youngest of a big family, and in my growing up years, it was a prerequisite to know how to sail and to understand chemistry, and then eventually to understand a little bit about agriculture. And so maybe where I ended up was part of that journey. But for me, the link between chemistry and biology were my love, and so that's what I ended up studying. From way back when I was an undergraduate, I insisted on linking across disciplines, and so I'm a bit of a hybrid between being a life scientist and an engineer. And I remain that today. So the space of linking disciplines has been really key to me. I went into industry as, for me, it was really important for my applied science to make a difference and to be applicable and to contribute to people's lives. And after a while there, I realized, well, I had this maybe naive idea that academia would offer me a great place to be able to balance my life of a challenging career and a family, because of course it's flexible, so-called flexible. We just work 14 hours a day, and so I joined UCT as a young academic in the engineering faculty, and as I said, it's a very, very different space at that time, a largely male world. And in the time I've been there, chemical engineering is now 45% women students. So the transition has been amazing, and I think it's one of the things we're very proud of. In terms of what I do in research, I think I'm very passionate about my research. I continue to link process engineering and life sciences, but it's moved from the very deep scientific questions to how those questions can be applied to our resources, our natural resources, of which there are only so many. So how do we use those natural resources in an efficient way that allows us to have a high quality of life, but not destroy our planet? And as I've done more and more work in that space, and it's spread across a number of process industries, the link between the industry and the community in which that industry is placed has become more and more important. And so you can see the spreading of disciplines and impacts becoming more and more important to me. I have, over my time at UCT, had a whole bundle of academic roles, from running a department through to setting up both the Center for Bioprocess Engineering Research and also the Future Water Institute, and running those. I joined the executive team just over a year ago. I continue to be active in my research. I can't say very active because there's not that much time, and really I'm loving the opportunities of looking at both research and internationalization at this university. We have a great space, we have great potential, we do absolutely amazing research, and being able to contribute to it is, as I said, a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Deputy Vice-Chancellor Liz Lange, in charge of teaching and learning. I'm very excited to hear about your journey as well. You've been in this area for a very long time, or certainly a person who has mastered the discipline within teaching and learning, and we're faced with such an interesting challenge not 4 years ago in looking at the consideration of fees, and which I suppose is a place that interacts or intersects with those of the transformation mandate. Won't you please let us know a little bit about your journey, even preceding that, and how that might have impacted your way of seeing things?
Thank you very much. Well, as you can hear, I'm not South African. I was born in Argentina some sort of 59 years ago. I've been at UCT only 2.5 years, unlike my colleagues who have been sort of much long timers here. I studied in Buenos Aires, in Mexico, and in South Africa. I came to South Africa some 30 years ago to do a PhD in history. And I got stuck here. I love the country and I fell in love here, so I made my family here. So in terms of my sort of trajectory, I was always a rebel, and I was always interested in changing the world. And I thought that education was the fundamental tool to change the world. I thought that if you could teach people to think, and thinking was a tool to examine one's own morality, then justice and change should happen. So for me, being in education and sort of betting my entire life on transformation has been one and the same thing. I've been very lucky in South Africa in the sense that although what I wanted to do was to be a full-time academic, I entered into the higher education system through the window. That is, I started working first at the funding branch of the Human Science Research Council at the beginning of the democratic government. Then I moved to the National Research Foundation when the HSRC and the all FRD were merged. From the National Research Foundation, I moved to the Council on Higher Education that was responsible for advising the minister and for quality assurance at national level. And then I had a fantastic stint at the University of the Free State under the leadership of Jonathan Jansen. And then I applied for the position of DPC here. My main areas of concern are curriculum, the politics of curriculum, the politics of academia. And I always say, although sometimes it scandalizes people a little bit, that education is political by definition, although not in the sense of the politics that we are sort of exposed to in the media. So I think that that's me. I have 3 brothers, 1 wife, 2 children, and 3 grandchildren, and 2 dogs.
It is such a pleasure to meet you. Henceforth, you are no longer Deputy Vice-Chancellors. Now that we know you all, we'll move forward as calling you respectively Loretta, Sue, and Liz. Thank you so much for letting us and taking us into your confidence on your academic journeys. One of the most powerful threads that I've picked up between all 3 of your stories would happen to be that of justice, being change agents and being pioneering. All 3 of you have been appointed in the past 3 years, which is quite recent considering how long women have been changing the game in academia, being change agents, seeking justice, and obviously being pioneers. I'd be curious to hear from you, each of you, when you were going for the job or when you began the job as Deputy Vice-Chancellor, what was the one thing at UCT that you were endeavouring to change? We can start with you, Loretta.
So thanks, Refilwe. I must admit that that at the time that I stepped into the position, we really had a smorgasbord of issues on the table. So for me, it wasn't one thing that I wanted to change. I know that if I could sort of collapse that smorgasbord into one issue, it would be changing the institutional culture of the university. And of course, that's a massive issue because when I started to unpack, what it means to change the institutional culture of this university, I realized actually that it was like a big box with several elements in it, and to tackle institutional culture, you have to tackle each and every one of those different elements. So for example, a university is made up of students and staff, and so of course I think for many years, or already before I stepped into the position, we started working when it comes to students on providing more access to more students. But of course, we know that access is one thing. Their ability to succeed remains a problem. And I think when you simply say to students, come into this space and become the way in which the university has always seen itself traditionally, I think that really does something to the psyche of particularly Black students. So I realize that means, and part of it is about numbers, right? So changing institutional culture means that you need to bring more Black students, more Black staff into the space so that it begins to reflect the general profile of South Africa. But that's not it. You know, you also have to kind of look at what is the culture in the classroom. What is the curriculum? What do we teach students? You know, is this something that that students can relate to? And what is the ways of engagement between students and lecturers? I mean, that speaks to institutional culture. When you look around, you know, at buildings, at languages on signs, on the pictures, on the walls. So that speaks to what I call place and space. You know, the literal spaces around us, but also the spaces that determines our engagement. So in the end, there wasn't one thing, you know, but it was really this kind of this big thing with many elements. But of course, I started in 2017, and we had just come out of 2 years of protest, and so the immediate task was to deal with the issues that students raised during the protest, and that were the kind of bread and butter issues that Black students were concerned about, which is residences, the ability to actually find accommodation when they come to university. It was issues such as financial aid, you know, the ability to access financial aid even when they, and I mean, it's sort of tied to student success. So for example, if you are no longer eligible to be on NSFAS, is there a way to support students so that they can actually get their degrees and go and get a job? So those were the kind of immediate issues that we focused on in 2017, and that really, despite my broader concerns around, you know, I want to drive institutional cultural change, I needed to attend to the bread and butter issues, and that was my first year.
Sure. I mean, it's difficult to talk about long-standing broad-based results after just 2.5 years, but probably one of the most immediate tests at the moment would have been the period during COVID-19, where immediately being forced into learning from home and working from home for many students, UCT tried very hard to democratize access in the same way that I think you were trying to bring justice to residents and on-campus access to the university. Do you think that some of those initiatives you put in place back in 2017, or that you began working on, found themselves playing out positively in the most recent COVID challenges?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, if I think of one of the ways in which we addressed the issue of accommodation. So in 2017, what sparked the protest in 2016 was the fact that students were not able to, there wasn't sufficient accommodation available for students. And so one of the things that we did was that we looked at other modes of getting accommodation, because you know, building a new residence, well, first of all, you need land, you need funds, etc., and that's not easily available, and plus it takes years to finish a residence. And so we looked at other models, which is leased accommodation, where we do as what we call a head lease with private developers. And so we used that model to increase our bed space. Now, come COVID, we are in a situation where we need to adhere to social distancing, where we actually have even less beds available than we would have had in 2016. And I think what is really helping us now is the fact that we are able to use the leased accommodation model. And so that has increased our bed space in terms of, especially, we first at the start of lockdown had to send students back, but as they are now returning to campus, we are able to provide them with alternative accommodation, not just in our residences, but also using leased accommodation. So that's definitely one of the, and it's also the relationships that we've built with private owners over the last 3 years that's allowing us to say, actually, we're in a crunch, we need more accommodation, can you help us? So I think that's supporting us. And then I think the other is that we've looked at, how do we support students in terms of providing them funding, even if that may be UCT funding. And what we did at the start of lockdown, when students went home and students that would normally have had their meals at residence, because we already had the systems in place, we were able to provide them with an allowance that will allow them to actually continue to access food at home, because we started a food security project, by the way, about a year ago at UCT, because we realized the extent to which students are going hungry, actively going hungry, and so part of, whilst we weren't able to continue with the food security program while students were off campus, using allowances to support students whilst they are not in the res, I think has been of benefit to many students.
Thank you so much, Loretta. To address Sue's earlier description about linking disciplines, this plays directly into your area of expertise. Sorry, Sue, I'm referencing you, but I mean for Liz. Liz, right. Loretta is highlighting the bread and butter and immediate issues that she had to respond to in COVID, and with respect to the justice and the equalization of education provision. As the Deputy Vice-Chancellor in charge of teaching and learning, one of the other demands that were made of students was, of course, the decolonization of education, of curricula, the inclusion of the African voice. To what extent and how has that been playing out in terms of, one, at the moment, but also two, in arriving at your goals for Vision 2030, which is also one of your areas?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, rather difficult question. The changes in the curriculum are much more profound than I thought they were when I came to UCT, and they have been taken much more rapidly than I imagined. So the work that the curriculum changing group that was set up by Max Price, was funded facilitated by Max Price, but it came through the grants, through the academics. Did a very important groundwork in mobilizing the conversation about decolonization at the university. As a consequence of that, many people took the torch of this sort of call. The issue that happens, and it's not a bad thing, but at universities like UCT, many of these things tend to happen as individual projects, not as an institutionally driven agenda. So there are interesting examples, fantastic examples of decolonized curriculum, interesting conversations across the faculties. There are introduction of new modules, examples. I can give you examples in every faculty. Social infrastructure and engineering, decolonized sciences in the Faculty of Sciences, a new approach to the education of health professionals in health sciences, extraordinary stuff in the Faculty of Humanities, and so it goes. But we haven't yet made this at the time at which I arrived into something that was institutionally driven. So now it is part of my work to do this, and the different structures of the university that do these things are very committed to it. So right now we are preparing a series of guidelines to how to go about doing these things. And there is a lot of enthusiasm and cooperation amongst the staff and needless to say with the students. So in that sense, we are quite happy. I think that we still need to take this thing one notch up, and it is to figure out a bit more structurally what kind of graduates this university wants to offer for South Africa and the world in the 21st century, and what is the role that the decolonized curriculum plays in that space, and how does the decolonized curriculum interfaces with other pressures that the university like that the UCT is facing, like, where do we stand in relation to the Industrial Revolution, to the globalization of capital, etc., etc. So it is a very, very exciting space. The COVID experience has taken us into a new dimension, and I think that we have learned a lot about curriculum, about the reality of our students, and about our capacity to do things, but also about the things that we have not done and we need to hurry up in doing. You asked Loretta, what did you want to change at the university when you took your position? Well, when I took my position, what I wanted to change, not coming from UCT, I was the sense that nothing needed to be changed because we were so wonderful. And I think that this is a very important thing, because I see that people are open to change, and this is what is happening. So it's a very, very exciting moment.
Thanks so much, Liz. I mean, the notion of being self-reflective enough to say, we need to change things, to not respond to the knee-jerk reaction of saying this is how things have always been done. These have been very much at the core, for example, of moving the needle, even to the inclusion of women. So I want to take this a little bit back to women. Sue, you raised a very, very important stat. In STEM, which is so important, 45% people of students are in your particular area of expertise at the moment, which is a staggering number considering how often we hear about women falling out of those disciplines, how often even maybe excuses are made. To what extent does self-reflection and other often traits that are often attributed to women leadership, to what extent does that play into being able to move the needle? How difficult is it to make these changes with a woman's style of leadership, if that can be defined as something in particular? Sue?
Thank you, Refilwe. So I think that again, it's a difficult question. I think that we take a different look on things, maybe from a woman style leadership. But I think also often the change that comes with, for instance, the change in the opportunities for women in STEM comes from I guess the mentorship and the mantra that we can do it, that the world isn't closed to to opportunities for particular groups of people to do particular things. And I think that's very much been the case in the area where I come from, is that it became acceptable. It became as women came into the area and succeeded in the area, it just grew. So I think that is a very strong thing. But I also think that in a women leadership space, we often don't sit with the same norms. And I think it's one of the really important things that we need to do in this country. I mean, we have such a word over in this country when we talk about STEM, that maths is difficult and physics is only for the absolute geniuses. Well, maths is something that many of us can do, and so can we do physics if we just will believe in ourselves. So I think that if we can change the needle, we need to change the way in which we perceive our abilities, and we need to maybe just have a little bit more self-belief that we aren't all put into boxes in this world, and if we are passionate about something and we apply ourselves and we want it enough, we will go there.
Thank you for that. Sue, I'm going to follow up with a question for you. If we were on the red carpet, you would be very frustrated with my next question, which is, how do you balance it all? You know, this is the question that is often asked of women, but it is quite demanded of women. One of the excuses that's often given as to why we don't advance in academia is this notion, not only of those self-beliefs that you just mentioned, that certain disciplines are too hard, but that, you know, women don't want to survive the environment, or that there's an excessive focus, and I certainly have experienced it in corporate, that women at some point always want to jump off the ladder. To take care of the family home, to fit into those norms that you were just describing. How important, I mean, you were speaking a little bit about your family a little bit earlier, so did Liz, mentioned her wife and the dogs who need attention. To what extent is a shift in our thinking about women's norms necessary in order for more women to succeed in academia and to be supported sufficiently in order to do so? And maybe reflect on your own experience. Yeah,
so you're absolutely right, Refilwe. I hate this question. But I will answer it. So, you know, I think in anything that we do as people, as well as women, we need to create balance in what we do. And so in creating that balance, there will always be things that we won't be able to do because we'll make choices to do other things. In my life, I've made a choice to have a full and busy career, and to live it as completely as I can, and to have a lovely family. And I viewed those two things as not, it couldn't be either or. It could never have been either or. I've been very lucky in doing that because my family decided to do the same thing. And so it was never all on me. And I think that's one of the things which is, you know, we shouldn't talk about this in terms of women only. We should talk about it in terms of people, because for me to have a balanced life like I have, and I've absolutely loved doing, required my partner to also buy into that and also have a balanced life, and my children actually also to buy into that and also have a balanced life. And so I think that is what's so important about how we make our life decisions, about what we're going to prioritize, what we're going to value, what is absolutely on the table as necessary for us, and what isn't. And so, as I say, for me, it was a non-negotiable. And I could have done things differently. And I think we each have a choice. I don't think it's necessary for all women to want to do what I've done. And I think that we should celebrate women who want to do things differently. But for those of us who want to have full careers and balance our careers and families, we need to position ourselves and to set what we value and stick with that. I think we have to be happy that we don't have to do it the traditional way, and that, you know, things won't always be done like our mums did it, or like our work partners might expect us to be doing it. And that is a great freeing space so that we live what works for us in creating that balance. I'm not sure whether that's useful. It's a bit non-tangible.
It is non-tangible, but isn't life. Let's take it to the tangible then. Loretta, perhaps give us a perspective here. I think Sue touched on an important point of ensuring that we continue to approach things as individuals around, I guess, fulfilling the human spirit, as an individual. And in that regard, I'm going to turn to one of our audience questions. Wutlaletima has asked an interesting question here saying, well, I know the answer to this, but for Wutlale's edification was the fact that UCT leadership right now is all women-led, 100% planned. And here's an interesting follow-up. What does that say about the male academics? Don't you miss male voices, literally and figuratively, in terms of how men think? Loretta, would you like to take that on?
So yes, I mean that is an interesting question, right? And so when you look at the way that this conversation is framed, and you may think, oh, UCT went on this path to only have women because we now also have a woman that's a chancellor. Of course, we've had that for the last couple of decades actually. But we also have a woman that is the chair of council. But none of this was actually planned. To my knowledge, UCT didn't set out, I don't know, 5 years ago and says, well, we're going to grow into a university that has a all women led leadership team. But what has happened, I think, is that there was an openness to understand the strength that women bring, and this was an openness that I hope speak to the fact that as a university we are becoming much more aware of the way in which this university, or actually higher education, does not acknowledge women leadership. But I think all of us, we had to compete, of course, because every position is in essence, a selection process is in fact a competition. We all had to apply for the position. We all had to indicate through our CVs, through our interviews, through the vision that we wanted to bring to these roles. We all had to indicate that we are the best, and I think we are at a time in this university's history where they have a group of women that all sort of succeeded in that competition, and so I think the conversation that we should actually have, Refilwe, is less about the fact that UCT have all of these women in this position, but where we should actually focus is the higher education sector, because when you look across the sector, you would see that when it comes to leadership of the public universities and in fact also the private universities, you will see that it's male dominated. Our Vice-Chancellor is one of a handful, I would say less than a handful of women VCs. I think that we currently have 3 or 4 women VCs. If we look at the next level of Deputy Vice-Chancellors, once again, you see a dearth of women. And then you would think of, okay, well, where do we get women from? I mean, where's the men academics? Well, where they are is they're dominating in the space of being professors and of being associate professors. The latest data is the 2018 data that we have of all of the universities in South Africa. And that shows you that women make up less than or around about 30% of the professoriate in this country. So, and where are you going to draw your leadership from? You're going to draw it from professors primarily. you're going to draw it from associate professors. Now you would think, associate professors would be climbing the ladder to become professors, and so maybe that's where the pool of women are. But the 2018 data shows us no, that doesn't look any better, because we only have about 35% of our associate professors in this country are women. So I think that's really what should concern us, is that that UCT is such an outlier, and that if we look at the next layer, the next pool of women that's going to step into leadership in academia, it's not a comforting space. So we should be having the conversation around, how do we ensure that we build leadership amongst women to actually step into these positions?
I'm going to throw that question back at you. Thank you very much, Loretta. And I'm only going to do that because I think Sue made an interesting point about, one can do whatever one believes in. And I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm being a little bit reductive for time's purposes. But again, I'll draw on my experience in the world, in corporate, without champions, without mentorship, without somebody leaning out, it's very difficult to lean in. Within the transformation mandate that you have, and I'd like to extend this beyond women, because your portfolio concerns itself with the likes of disability, with, I'm sure, LGBTQ concerns, and I'm sure with international students, particularly from the perspective that they are welcomed in many respects to a hostile environment. And I'll lean back to the VC in charge of internationalization on that one as well, but I know that's more research. But how do we find, how do we change the levers as they have been running to date to ensure that mentorship, that championship actually occurs? It's difficult to legislate support.
Yeah, no, I agree, and support may look very different at different institutions. And so one thing one should do as a starting point is to not make the assumption that it is, and that academia is an equal playing field. It's not an equal playing field when we talk about men and women. It's not an equal playing field when we talk about Black people and versus white people, because we know that we sit with our legacies from our past. I think we have even more of a problem when we talk about marginalized communities such as disabled people, the LGBTQI community. So I think if you depart, it's very powerful to depart from that assumption that you're not sitting with an equal playing field, because then it allows you to bring in interventions that's going to equalize the playing field. And so UCT, but other universities as well, are sort of are bringing in those interventions. So, for example, at UCT we have the Next Generation Professoriate program, which creates, that makes available time and research grants and writing spaces, as well as the mentorship that you're talking about. But we know that that's actually not enough, and we're working on how do we, right now we're looking at how can we expand beyond the Next Generation Professoriate. But it actually needs to start earlier, right? And so one of the I think the most positive things that has come from national government over the last 5, actually more, probably about 6 years now, is a program that's called the Next Generation Academics, where government actually put in some support for universities to appoint Black staff and to provide them with research support, to provide them with grants, infrastructure grants. And so what we've done at UCT is to create a cohort of what we call NGAP academics. So these are people that still needs to have their doctorate and to work towards a doctorate. So we ring-fence their time very carefully so that we actually give them more time to spend on you know, completing a doctorate so that they can then you know, go and go up the ranks into associate professorship. So I think these are the kinds of interventions that is needed, but that we also need to scale. You know, and then of course we need to think about, where do you start? You start really as somebody going into the postgraduate space, and how do we provide support for students to actually go, you know, so that they graduate, their master's degree, their doctorate degree, and actually have a pathway into academia. And I think that's one of those spaces where we probably need much more investment as a country, not just as a university, because too few Black and female students consider going into academia. And we need to make it more attractive for them to enter into academia. And we also have to kind of smooth the pathway into academia.
Thanks so much for that, Loretta. Sue, back to you. Just speaking about those master's students, speaking about those postgrads, I suppose in attracting the best of the best, be it men, be it able-bodied women, LGBTQ, however diverse the university would like to be, is often driven by being seen as a top research institution. And that means in the world that we're playing, not just here in SA, which I think UCT comfortably, you know, plays a strong hand in South Africa, but that's on the continent, that's internationally, globally, staying on those top lists. How do we affect that within the research that we provide, and the support that Loretta is highlighting?
Thanks, thanks, Refilwe. So I think I'd just like to step back before I go there into a lot of what Loretta said, and that is the importance of providing the support and providing the mentorship as we move along. So the line of that it's not a level playing field is very, very important, and that merges with my line earlier on of you must believe in yourself, because if you're not on a level playing field and you don't believe in yourself, you're certainly not going to get to the front. But the mentorship along the way becomes really, really important. So the best postgrads in being a place where the best postgrads want to come. Yes, we certainly need to be a university with a good ranking and with which is known for its research. And I think that this whole nexus of research and teaching is so important, because they work with each other, and in an environment where one's driven by one's research, one also ends up putting that way of thinking into the undergraduate curriculum, or you have the potential to do it. We don't always do it right, and I think it's one of the things which Liz is very, very keen for us to build towards more. So those two things work together very carefully, very much. And UCT has, in a number of places, it plays well up the ranks in terms of the kind of research it does. I mean, in our health sciences research, we rate really, really well internationally, and I think one of the things which is we're very proud of is that in development studies we rank 10th in the world, but in other places we don't rank like that. So so it is important for us to find our key areas where we can really be known well, but equally well, and that helps to attract in the really good postgrad students. But equally well, we want to be a place where we are serving the postgrads of South Africa, and where we provide opportunities for students from all over South Africa to join us at UCT and to be able to move through the ranks and obtain their PhDs and excel. And that needs us to have thought really carefully about that process of being a postgrad student, and the support in terms of the way we introduce people to research, the way we support them on their research journey, and the way they can financially be with us. I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about how we position our research on the international arena versus how we position our research within South Africa. And you commented a little bit on my my view of the importance of it, that it is to place UCT within South Africa and within Africa, as well as being a global player. And I think that, you know, for so many of us, UCT could view itself as a university at the tip of Africa, and we could view ourselves as remote from the, for instance, in the STEM community, remote from the bulk of the STEM community. But we can also view ourselves as a absolute linking agent of being able to bring together, as I say, the ability to work in these, to be recognized in fields as a really top research university, not all fields, but some fields, and then the ability to relate into our environment in terms of, for instance, a number of the global challenges which really play out in the space in which we are in terms of poverty and inequality, access to water, resource efficiency, health affordability, etc. And we have this great ability to then position these fields to position Africa's work within the global field, and to contribute globally and to contribute in Africa at the same time, but not to contribute in a way that we are the add-ons in the global world, but to contribute in a way that we are central to the to how these fields are playing out globally. And I think that is something that we really are thinking about a lot. So who sets the agenda of many of these issues around the global challenges? Who sets the questions? How do we work with the data that we have on socioeconomic issues, and where does that get housed, and who drives that agenda? So I think that's a space where UCT can play a big role, and something I hope that we will do more and more over the next few years.
So do I. I mean, if I can think about very recent examples that maybe some of our viewers have seen recently, a bit of an outcry, for example, around how international media seems so surprised that the Africans aren't dying through the COVID-19 pandemic. Why aren't they dying? And I'm not sure if they've tapped on your shoulder in terms of the academics at UCT to ask us exactly how to answer that question. Another one that I saw the other day was a British academic of African descent, aghast at the lack of the inclusion of a single African or Black diaspora contributing researcher to a publication on the history of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. It's so important for us to be the leading voices on our own stories. So I don't know if you have any comment on that, but I want to ask Liz a question afterwards, if you may.
Yeah, just quickly, I think that is absolutely key. It's absolutely key to how we do our work and how we position ourselves. So, I mean, one of the things that we were dealing with earlier in the year, and we were looking at the handling of data, and realizing that their communities in there's a lot of fly in to collect your research samples and fly out to work up the data, and there's data on communities in different parts of Africa where, for instance, DNA samples have been collected, and that DNA data, which would help us to understand our populations, actually is now housed somewhere else in the world and belongs to somebody else in the world. And the community from which it was collected, or the universities in that community from which it's collected, cannot get access to that data. Now, that's not the way we want to do our work. We want to be able to own the data that we collect on our environments, and we want to be able to work with that in a way which is fair and equal and just. And so that's some of the areas that we really are focused on, about how we do that, how we create openness and sharing, and the ability not to lose ownership of our own information. Thanks. I'll let you move on to Liz.
Absolutely. No, by all means, thank you so much. So two things here, Liz. On the one hand, I would really like to hear your perspective as a person of Argentinian descent. This is not your first South African University. I know that love is what kept you here. But you were obviously attracted to our universities as one from a part of the world that was that is already respected in its own academic sense. And then the second part of my question is in keeping with Loretta's intent on getting our university students into postgrad, or everybody's intent on getting us into postgrad, Sue's intent on ensuring that we are in the research world. I do have a question here from one of our audience on, I guess I could call it the preschool to professorial pipeline. Shamsunisa Dalwai has asked a question about what possible RPL services are offered to ECD practitioners to upskill in education and have access to MA opportunities that will definitely improve the quality of ECD education in the country. Just from your curricular focus, I'd love that answer, please.
Sure. Okay, let me start with the sort of Argentinian perspective. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I've been 30 years in this country, so my Argentinian perspective is very, very blurred. So I'm afraid that I have more of a South African experience. However, I have studied in South America and in Latin America, both in Argentina and in Mexico. There are things in the Latin American organization of universities which are interesting and that are things that we should be looking at. And one of them is that the state system of universities is free, and education is free from early childhood until you finish your university, and that includes a PhD. That was the system in which I studied. That's the system that helps in Mexico, in a lot of Chile, in Brazil, etc. That does not mean that there are not private universities, but free education is a very important thing. And this in Latin America, certainly in Argentina, is based on the notion that the schooling system is sufficiently good for you to be able to work, to get a job on the side while you study at the university. All universities, or the large majority of universities, are urban and non-residential. So it's a completely different dynamic. So that makes it easier for greater social mobility and all of that. So in that sense, I think that the system in Latin America is particularly good. Cape Town is Cape Town. I mean, I did not know that the University of Cape Town existed while I was growing up in Argentina, but had I known, I would have wanted to be here. So UCT has fantastic things to offer. South Africa has, in general, a higher education system that works fairly well, and that has made important changes, and it is an example of many things. So certainly UCT can give almost anybody a good run for their money. So I'm very, very happy in that sense. In terms of the other two questions, one of the things that we have been discussing and as part of the deep curricular changes is how does the University of Cape Town externalize its research intensive nature at undergraduate level. What do we do in the undergraduate degree that when our graduates graduate, they are ready to conduct research at postgraduate level, they are ready, they want to do it, or have acquired sufficient research skills to function in life at a higher level. So I think that that's the direction in which we are moving. We have the blessing of having our young students being taught by top range academics. So across all our disciplines. So we need to use those opportunities also to teach specific research skills. In relation to the specific questions about ECD and RPL, the person who is interested in these matters can contact the School of Education, where we have an RPL system, and can talk to the colleagues there, and they will probably help in terms of how does one move into from the experience and see whether you can get into a master's degree. That depends on the specifics. But I think that I think that I have covered all three questions.
It certainly does. Thank you so much, and loved hearing from you as a South African. Thank you, Loretta. Thank you very much, Liz. I have another question here around, which I think is partially addressed, two questions that are quite similar. The one is asking about how UCT's women leadership in their capacity, sorry, this is from Mangwane Maela, asking how the UCT women's leadership in their capacity as change agents encourages younger females to join academia as part of the D&I agenda, the diversity and inclusion agenda, and there's a specific mention here to the importance of age. I guess from a diversity perspective, but also addressing sort of the younger people and creating this interest in academia. And then the second question, which I think is, I'm going to ask you because I think it's more or less the same. Marianne, thank you very much for this question, saying, as the discussion takes place, I wonder if actions mustn't be taken from the last undergraduate years, as many women don't carry on to postgraduate studies. What I'll take out from those two questions, I suppose, is how actionable is it? How do we attract? If we all agree that we need to attract people into academia, how do we attract them? I will challenge you again, Liz.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was wondering where it was a question for Sue. Look, I definitely something that we can do. We've been discussing earlier today, the three of us with the Vice Chancellor, about an intense transformation program that Loretta has put together, looking more specifically at Black academics, but the same logic applies to women. So it is true, women tend to graduate and not to do postgraduate studies as much as men. But actually, in terms of the population that we have at undergraduate level, we have more women than men in the total population at undergraduate level at the university. So we should capitalize on that, and we should understand. I mean, we understand fairly well what the limitations are, where the problem exists. So we should start picking up women in the same way that we would start picking up Black prospective academics to do postgraduate degrees. It's perfectly actionable. So there's no doubt in that regard. That's
fantastic. Loretta, in terms of also flattening or equalizing the playing ground, Louise has sent us a question. Actually, before I ask this question, as it is now 5:39, which is the end of the formal part of our discussion, please, I would like to encourage you to continue sending your questions in the Q&A box, and we will continue to address them. We do have a bit more time. So Louise's question is, the issues of access to funding remain a big concern for many students, not just at uni level. What is UCT doing in that regard, i.e. to make education accessible? I'm thinking their alumni program that, alumni program that programs that facilitate cheaper education, UCT leading conversations, for example, with key funders and the like.
So, you know, we've been working very hard at exactly that, because if I just go one step back to the previous conversation about, you know, getting women into the postgrad space, and that's really women as well as Black students into the postgrad space, it's also about funding, right? So many students, of course, Black students in particular, come from families that are not very well off. And so just being able to send them to university, we know that that's already, you know, that many families cannot even afford that. And so, of course, students would get, for example, funding from NSFAS, and they get their first degree. But what if they then want to go into academia? It requires them to have a postgraduate degree, and then where's the funding? Because the state doesn't have much funding. We have the National Research Foundation, and that funding has been dwindling. So what we've been doing is first of all, we've been providing additional support to undergrad students who wants to study, especially students. You know, you often have students who are, they've got 1 year to go, but their NSFAS funding is completed because they're no longer eligible for NSFAS funding. We have been providing funding for those students to complete their degrees. What we've also been doing, I think, over the last 2 years is we've provided funding for postgraduate students over and above the funds that's provided by government and the limited funding there. At UCT, we've made funding available for students that are in the honors program, so that allows them, you know, to move from honors into masters, and then so that funding we made available in 2018, and then in 2019 we said, okay, well now we also need to look at digging a little bit deeper and finding support for students into their masters and their postgraduate degrees. So the funding needs to be there. I think the other thing, I mean, I saw the question about, you know, what do we do as change agents? I think in our role as you know, these kinds of engagements, I think allow us to encourage women to go into academia. We can't, as Sue has already illustrated, we can't promise you that you will have a balanced lifestyle. We can't promise you that there's not a glass ceiling, because I think we've spoken to that. But we do know that it allows you to focus in an area of expertise that you're really passionate about, and most academics will tell you they are passionate about the work that they do. And it also allows you to bring about change, right? Because you're in that unique position where you are able to influence young minds. And I think that's one of the most fulfilling things about academia. And then personally, you know, I always try to make sure that I'm supervising women. And so I have women as part of my cohort. And to also, you know, as through the supervising journey, we have conversations about, you know, publication, conferencing, all of these kinds of things that is very much integral of academic life, and sourcing funding. And so I think that's what we all do as women academics, as Black academics, is to encourage and to enable the next generation to go into academia.
I think we've covered a great deal about where we're coming from, how things have been changing, particularly under your leadership through your careers, and our hopes for the future. I want to talk a little bit about that future, particularly on the global scale, and I'll leave this one as free for whomever would like to address it, and it may be all three of you. There is sometimes a belief from outside academia that relevance in the real life workings of the economy, of development of R&D and the like, might be a little bit stayed, might not necessarily have as much relevance as it should to very fast changing pace. That studying the thoughts of Milton Friedman won't necessarily help me in building an AI algorithm for trading tomorrow at Goldman Sachs, or let's give it a South African name, at Investec. So I'm curious to know, and feel free to incorporate this in your views and visions for Vision 2030. Is academia ready? This is not a shot against UCT. Is academia ready to step into the future that way, for research to be able to turn around fast enough to respond to the needs of a changing world? And how are we preparing ourselves to be exactly the partner with whom to do that?
can I start?
Please, Liz.
I would like to, I mean, I don't think that reading Milton Friedman will help you much with the kind of world in which we live, but I mean, that's a footnote.
Yeah, I agree.
I would like to change the question slightly. I think it is the other way around. It is not whether the university is ready, but what the Vision 2030 is putting the challenges that we want to lead that change. We want to say where to go. And I think that that's what has made the university so excited about this challenge that the Vice-Chancellor put to us. This is not whether UCT is ready for the future. This is how does UCT want to shape that future, and how is it going to help doing that? And that starts at the beginning. So this journey in which we are embarking is a journey that starts with how do we teach our students from their undergraduate up, and what are the different attitudes and values and perspectives about knowledge that academics have in the mentorship relationship with their students. So I think that what it is changing is the notion that the university has to provide students with knowledge. And we are learning more and more that knowledge can be acquired through other vehicles. What it is essential that the university provides is the community of scholars and students that grapple together with problems, that find the passion that Loretta is talking about, that have a same sense of morality and commitment to society, and that understand that in these times, the more sort of individualistic way of looking at your career is not an option. That in a sense, and I'm not a religious person, but we save ourselves as a human community, or we don't save ourselves at all. And I think that that's what is moving the university, and I think that that's the reason why this is so unbelievably exciting. Sorry, I don't want to talk too much.
That's really powerful. No, we must talk more. We've got a platform to talk as women. We must. There's no such thing as talking too much. Sue, Loretta, I'm actually really impassioned and excited to hear your thoughts on Vision 2030 and follow up to that as well.
So I'm very happy to come in here now, and I think it's very important to build on Liz's points that it isn't about where we're trying to take people isn't about trying to take them to be able to do very well what somebody else tells them to do, but it is about defining that space. And so that's why we talk so much about justice in our vision, and equity. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to be absolutely as good as ever and better than that, then in very concrete science, engineering, commerce, etc. kind disciplines. But we want to create that focus around working to this common good that Liz talks about. I use different words to her, and in many of those places we're going to have to do things differently to how we've been doing them before. So there will be the fundamentals, for instance, in research, the fundamentals of research on building new knowledge, which will allow us to do new things into the future, which aren't necessarily defined yet. But there'll also need to be this new way of doing things that makes us agilely able to deal with problems of the now and the future, which will need us to be able to work together in different forms of teams, in the way that we can intercalate our knowledge from different places to tackle these kind of issues. And so that needs us to develop a way of thinking that values that, and that puts those problem solving, critical thinking, thought leadership skills all together. And I think that as we do that, there's this whole space of social cohesion that we're going to have to build. And I bring that up partly because of the conversations we have been having about how do we get, how do we assist, how do we bring through women to be women women to be able to reach, to be able to function in the academia and to have great careers moving out, and that often will be buoyed up or be assisted by creating these mentorship patterns, the social cohesion, the group in which you can work in this very different way. I think will really be part of where we're going. It's absolutely true that universities will have to both be very rigorous about what they're doing, but they'll also have to be agile. We're going to have to be able to work fast on a number of things because we've got the basis on which to build to get that agility. We'll pass over to Loretta.
Yes, please, Loretta.
So thanks for that. So you know, one of the things that as in developing the strategy that was kind of foundational for us is to not lose this notion of developing or preparing students for a society that is not just focused on where are we going in the future and how do we drive technology and how do we ensure that we get the biggest gains for our own pockets, and but to also actually think about the fact that we are embedded in a society where there are some deep and real problems that speaks to inequality, that speaks to you know, deep-seated environmental problems that's only going to multiply as we go forward. You know, climate change, for example, being one of the biggest ones. The water disaster that we recently had that had an impact really on the poorest communities. So how do we, you know, produce students, or that capacitate students? I think that's perhaps a better word. That'll allow them to, as Liz and Sue has said, use their problem-solving skills to actually address these kinds of issues, not just for South Africa, but actually our focus is a much more of a broader African-based focus. So we build in some core values around redressing inequality, a return to dignity, and amplifying voice and agency as part of carrying the vision forward over the next 10 years. So, you know, so it's, and what's inspiring for me is that, of course, this is not, we're not trying to start from scratch with students. When I think of our students, when I think of the kinds of activities that they engage in, there's already that kind of the spirit and the quest for social justice is very much present. You know, we have the VC sponsors an annual sort of entrepreneurship competition, and it was striking to me last year when I looked at, you know, when the students were presenting their ideas to the judges. That the bulk of them were actually ideas that centered around how do we solve social problems. You know, it's of course social entrepreneurship, but it's, you know, it's sort of the need to also generate funding. But the majority of the ideas were primarily, you know, sort of in the public health space, in environmental space, and these are just some of the ones that I can remember. And I was thinking, you know, as we were working on this vision, I think we kind of have a student body and a generation, you know, the millennials that's kind of thinking about social justice issues. And so I think that creates a wonderful springboard for us in terms of our students to launch this vision for the university.
Deputy Vice-Chancellors, Loretta, Liz, and Sue, it's now a little bit over 5:54. At my morning job, the music would be playing now. So apologies for running a little bit over. Russell, I just want to take an opportunity, though, to, first of all, thank you so much to our audience for joining us, but actually to the three of you to thank you for taking us into your confidence. In particular, I'm so grateful that we began by speaking about your aspirations in academia, why you're here, and your passions, because I now want to end off by congratulating you for living your dreams. And and fulfilling them. And the acknowledgement, your shared acknowledgement of our lived realities and complexities as individuals, as society, and as an environment are so powerfully brought together in this discussion by your affirmation of the cohesive and inclusive nature of women leadership, which is that when you have a seat at the table, it is engendered and incumbent upon us to fix the table, pull up another chair, or to build a bigger table. So thank you for doing that across all of your spheres. And with that, I'll hand over to Dr. Russell Ali.
Refilwe, thanks so much for moderating what was a really fascinating, engaging, personal, introspective, and honest conversation. And I really hope our alumni enjoyed it. I don't know, I think that when Lebo introduced you, she did say that you are one of ours as well. You are a graduate of our Graduate School of Business. So you, again, another example of the kind of leadership that we are striving to produce at the university. I think that, you know, when we look at issues of transformation, and this is, you know, Loretta's area of responsibility, it's necessary to always look at it at different levels. You know, the easiest is always what is representation, is just to include, is to have numbers. Okay, that's often the easiest. The next level, which is a little more difficult, is to be inclusive. In other words, that you look at institutional culture and change. That's always more tricky. But I think personally, the most challenging part of transformation is about voice. In other words, who speaks for whom, and what is the conversation about. And I think at the University of Cape Town, in terms of the leadership that we have at the most senior level at the university, I think we've done exceptionally well at all three levels. Now, that doesn't mean that across the university, that doesn't mean that we don't have to do a lot of work. But I think at the senior level, from the Vice-Chancellor, the DVCs downwards, that we don't only have representation, we're not only looking at institutional culture, but it's also who speaks. And I think that is very, very critical. And I think our alumni can rest assured that the university is in good hands, that we actually have a leadership that understands the challenges and can give a unique voice to those challenges. I don't want to put our Vice-Chancellor on the spot, but I noticed on my screen that she actually is part of the conversation. Are you here with us, VC? Because you may just want to say hello and goodbye, because I'm sure you followed the conversation with a lot of interest as well. But I don't want to put you on the spot.
You're putting me on the spot, definitely, Russell. But I've been listening, and it's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks to the colleagues, and thanks to Refilwe for the moderation. I mean, colleagues shared our Vision 2030 so well, exactly where we're going. And what Russell said is precisely that. What you're seeing is the cohesion of the team. You cannot lead a university such as this one to the extent that we are doing as an individual. And I'm very fortunate to be working with these colleagues in the leadership. Thanks very much, Russell, and thanks to everyone who's attending.
Thank you, VC, and thanks everybody. Thanks Loretta, thanks Sue, thanks Liz, and to the team. You know, we must always remember that there are people behind the scene, do the technical infrastructure support, and they do a great job. So thank you to our ICS team, and have a good rest of the day, and keep safe, everybody. Thank you very much.